Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it depends on where your time zone is, but it's afternoon here. I'm Bill Fairman. This is Jonathan Davis with Carolina Capital Management. Welcome to our show, Passive Income Active Wealth. And by the way, our website is carolinahardmoney.com. If you're an investor looking for passive returns, click on the investor tab. If you are a borrower looking to borrow private or hard money, click the Apply Now button. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like. Again, hit the bell. That's a new one to me.
What is that even on? I'm not a techie. It's hit the bell
No
on?
idea what platform that is.
Yeah, I don't either.
But this is our Ask an Ugly Question segment. Speaking of questions and answers, we do have a comment section either on the right side of your screen or underneath, depending on the platform that you're viewing us from. You can go ahead and ask us any questions while we're on the air here, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. How you doing?
We'll do our best.
How are you, Jonathan?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Live from the home office, but the more important question is, how are you, and how's Wendy? I know the last time we talked to you guys were kind of under the weather. You sound a little better.
Yeah, I still have a little bit of annoying cough. I've got some lingering pneumonia. They call it COVID pneumonia. So apparently you get inflammation in your lungs as part of the problem with this thing. But, there's all kind of different symptoms that people get. And not all of them get the same symptoms, which is, kind of odd. But we're working on the back end of this thing and getting stronger and healthier every day. Wendy is taking the day off to recover herself. She hit her a little bit harder than I tell you, one thing I've learned about this is that I was so happy that I was in good physical shape before this hit me. If I would have gotten this, 3 or 4 years ago when I was a couch potato, I think there would have been a different outcome, frankly.
Yeah, those 2 and 3 boot camps a week have really paid off, haven't they?
2 and 3. You mean
Don't
3 and 4?
3. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I lost 8 pounds and didn't do anything. So now it's a diet I don't recommend.
It's not a diet. That's sickness is not a sustainable way of weight loss.
This is true.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was doing a podcast yesterday and the host said, "Wow, you really look good." And I said, "That's what people always say when you're sickly." Are you a vegan now?
You've got that dehydrated glow about you.
I'm recovering from COVID.
Yeah.
That's why I look so much better than I did when I was healthy.
Well, from 3 years ago, you look a heck of a lot better.
Thank you so much. We do have some, I don't want to say breaking news, but we do have some news that, in the jobs front and whatnot that we have been trying to keep up with during this time. So I'm going to pause for a moment with our breaking news graphics. Wow, I'm impressed.
That was nice.
That was pretty cool. So, new jobless claims came in this morning. The estimate was 735,000, and it came in above that at 751,000. It's still fairly close, but it's still under 800,000, which is a good thing. Continuing jobless claims was a little higher than estimate as well, but it was a little over 7 million, which is not bad considering at one part during the summer. I don't know if it was May or June. Could have been July. I'm not sure. I mean, we were up to 20 million, and so we've turned that around quite a bit to be only in the 7 million. Now, that said, we have COVID cases increasing in spots around the country, and depending on where you live, those states may be closing up a little bit. I know if you live in New York, you're not traveling because you go outside of the state, or people aren't traveling to New York, because if you can't prove that you're negative for COVID, you have to be quarantined for 14 days. So who the heck's going to travel back and forth when you don't know whether you're going to be stuck there for 14 days or not? So that's going to have an impact on employment until we have some sort of a vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd prefer that the states open up. I wouldn't want anybody to get this, but let's face it, there's a very small percentage of the population that are going to have deaths from this, and those people, we kind of know who they are going to be for the most part. The very old, and the people with heart, lung diseases, diabetics, people that are severely overweight. So those people have to really be vigilant, and but it doesn't mean that the rest of the country has to completely shut down. For those folks, you can still protect those folks, and I encourage the governments to do that.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the elections. This looks like it's going to be a long, drawn out process. However, what I do know, no matter what happens, the Senate is going to stay Republican. The House is going to be, it looks like their margin is going to be a little bit less, but either way, it's going to be gridlock for the next 2 years.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So that's a good thing. And
gridlock's a good thing.
It's counterintuitive to say that, but it is when it comes to government. No matter what party is in full power, you don't want swings one way or another. Business wants a little bit of certainty, and when you have gridlock, that's certainty. You know what's going to happen, which is nothing. And politicians, for the most part, want to spend your money, and not always the way you want the money to be spent. And that said, I like the corporate tax structure right now. That's not going to change. If Joe Biden becomes president, the one thing that it concerns me is the presidential orders that they can reverse.
The executive order that they can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that Trump did that was very necessary for our industry is the deregulation. Here's the thing: regulations stifle small businesses, because your big multinational corporations, they have the money and the backbone to overcome lots of compliance and regulation. And it's the smaller guys that are doing all the innovation that get pummeled with these things, because they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the team of lawyers, the money to waste on compliance, instead of utilizing their talents with coming up with new ways to create wealth. Their brain power is going towards how to not circumvent, but how to how do I want to say this and not sound like an idiot? They need to be able to get in there and work with the regulations and get get through the maze of things, obstacles that are in front of you. That is not wealth um, growing energy that's being spent. That's being spent on uh, headwinds. Does that make sense?
I think so.
That's why you have so many people figuring out ways to get around rules and regulations, which is a shame. There's whole industries that are created around that. That's why there's so many CPAs. if we if we had a basic flat tax where everybody paid a percentage period, you'd have very little need for all the tax advisors, right?
Oh, that's true. No, you're right.
Whole industries have been built around trying to um, work within the bureaucracies. Now, don't get
Yeah.
me wrong; the government needs to protect the public, but what ends up happening is government just always tends to grow, and then look look how long it takes to build a highway. We have this stretch of highway uh, in near Charlotte, but it's between Gastonia and Hickory. It took 23 years to build a 4-lane highway that was only about 40 miles long. I don't even know if it was 40 miles long. It might be 30. And it had to do with a particular violet that grew, and it was a species that was endangered. And every time they dug it up and transplanted it, a new one would grow. It took them 23 years to finally get all of them transplanted.
The road looks kind of like this,
Right.
weaving around that violet.
Here's my question. Obviously, that was a good place for that thing to grow because it kept coming back.
Yeah, right.
So instead of taking 23 years to make sure it didn't come back in that area, why didn't they just build a road around its favorite spot?
Common sense and a lot of things don't mix.
Yeah. Well,
especially in government.
But back to the one of the things that Donald Trump did that was really good for business was lower and get rid of a ton of regulations that were really unnecessary. You have regulations, and then you had regulations on top of regulations, and you had so many different agencies that were had regulations on. You had many instances where a company would come in and do a bid for a project and be out of business before the project ever got off the ground because it took them so long to get through all the obstacles, and it was the regulations part of it. So,
and when you say the regulations, he took away regulations on small business, like when can you make that like real for us, like from the lending side, like what regulations did he take away, or any business? Kind of give us a real world example.
Well, this is mostly on the construction side of things.
Makes sense.
And it's mostly overreach from the EPA, and then you have so many parts of the EPA, the air quality, the water quality, soil quality. I mean, it just goes on and on. And what they did is that, and I can't give you a specific regulations that he got rid of. All I know is he got rid of a bunch of them that were not necessary because they were already covered under a different agency. So, and that was the problem. You had many agencies within the government that would be regulating the same thing. So it's not like you're not complying with one. You have to comply with 5 or 6 different ones, and everybody had to sign off, or it wouldn't go through.
That is a bit onerous. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a lot.
And again, when you have as a general theme, when you have a lot of regulations, it's the big multinational corporations that end up benefiting from that because no one else is going to innovate and cause competition for them if they have to spend so much energy, time, and money on complying with rules and regulations. to that extent, and it makes it a more even playing field for the smaller businesses. And typically,
Yeah.
that's why you see your bigger multinational companies that they don't mind regulation because that helps stifle their competition. Seriously.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, only publicly traded companies can survive 2, 3, 4, 5 years with negative income. Your small
Yeah.
businesses can't do that.
No, absolutely. All right. So, enough of this whining. Let's get to our ugly question. And I'm assuming we have graphics for
Our
Ask
ugly
the
question.
Ugly Question. Maybe.
No. Love it. Love it. Oh man. Well, Bill, what is our first ugly question for today?
All right. Number one. What happens if the owners get sick or die? And owners of what?
Anything, right? Like
Yeah.
owners of a fund that you're in, you, the owner of a fix and flip property, whatever investment vehicle you're in a syndication, and the syndicator who put it all together. What happens then?
Yeah. Or if you're just the investor and your money is invested in a fund or in a loan, what happens if you get sick or die?
So it's a morbid,
And Jonathan and I were talking about this earlier. Wendy actually put these questions forward, and I think she had plenty of time to think while she was recovering from COVID. So we kind of have an idea where her head was at during this time.
Yep. Well, but she's doing very well now. So.
Yep. So, and we're going to talk about this in a minute anyway, about the contingency plans, but everybody has to have, a contingency in place anyway.
Sure.
Now,
well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the best, we'll get into contingency plans, but what happens if someone gets sick or die? I mean, that's the importance of partnerships and teams. Like, you can do something alone. What's that old saying? If you want to do something fast, do it alone. If you want to go far, go with a team or a partner. Go fast or go far. But we here at Carolina, we have built a team that, Bill, Wendy, or even myself, gone, any one of us or all three of us combined, it still keeps running. It still keeps doing its thing. And it's the power of a team. It's the power of the right butts in the right seats, for lack of a better expression. You have people who know what they're doing, know how to do it, and have been empowered to make decisions. There are only a few things that, our team is waiting for Bill to decide on, or Wendy to decide on, or me to decide on, or all three of us collectively. There's very few things. Most things, they're empowered to make their own decisions. And that's the power of a team. So when you have a team, then, what happens if someone gets sick or someone passes away? Well, if it's a business, it keeps on running. If it's an investment, it keeps on producing. So it's the power of a team.
Well, that also gets back to building your business to sell, even though you're probably not going to sell. But
that's a good point.
If you build your business to sell, then any moron can get in there and make money with it. Right? Because it runs itself.
Yeah, you build your business. I mean, it sounds like I'm not trying to be, crass or anything, but like, you build it to be dummy proof. Like, right. You build it so you're, I always think in terms of my kids. I build it so my 8-year-old daughter can go in there and make some money. That's how I look at things.
Well, part of building it to sell is that if the business revolves around you or another member of your team, and if you were going to sell that business, what's it really worth? I got a lot of that from the dental industry, veterinarians, the private practice person. where the business revolves around that person. People are there because of that practitioner, that dentist, that veterinarian. And those people have to put folks in a position where, frankly, they can go and take a month's vacation and not miss a beat. That's the only way you're going to build a real business. Otherwise, you're just a highly paid hourly employee. And when you go away, so does your business. And when it's time for you to retire, most of these folks figure, well, I'll work until I can't bend over anymore, and I'll sell the business to a new younger doctor coming out of school. Excuse me. The problem is, if it revolves around you, there's no guarantee that any of those patients are going to, show up for the new doctor. And now your business is only worth the furniture, fixtures, and equipment that you have in there. If you own the real estate, it's worth that. But it's not a business that is saleable, right?
Yeah.
Pardon me.
All
I should
right.
be using my mute when I do this. my apologies. So let's talk about if you're the borrower on a property and you've got a whole bunch of projects going on, and you're the one that is doing all the work. I think Wendy had spoken about this before, that she had spoken with somebody who was doing all the work, and which was great, and they did it nice and inexpensively. But if they ever got hurt on the job or sick and couldn't do it, everything comes to a halt.
Yeah.
I mean, and how do you sustain like that?
You don't. I mean, because think about your purchasing model. You're purchasing these assets based on a lower cost to rehab them because you're doing the work yourself. So if you find yourself sick and unable to do the work and you have to hire a GC, your profit margins are completely obliterated. Like you've just created a model that is dependent on you sweating day in and day out doing this work, right, which is not conducive to someone else coming in and doing the work. So, yeah, I mean, in that scenario, you get sick and, or worse, but that's, it doesn't work. Your model doesn't work. So should you be setting up a model that is dependent on you being healthy all the time?
Yeah. And granted, when you're starting a small business, it is you. You just need to work. You just have to work towards having a business and not just having a job.
Yeah, I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, and the whole thing is, it's, like you said, you build a business like you're trying to sell it, and right, the goal is when you get sick or step away or whatever the case may be, if you've built a successful business, your dollars per hour as the owner will go up when you step away, and the company will still make as much or more money. That's what you're looking for, when you're setting this up, that when I step away, my dollars per hour go up and the company stays where it is or improves.
Actually, in most cases, it improves, because a lot of times as business owners, we end up becoming the bottleneck because too many people are depending on you to say yes or no to something when those decisions should be allowed to be taken care of by the person whose job it is.
Yeah, and that comes back to empowering your team.
Right.
If you as an owner and if you are constantly contradicting, micromanaging, or any of those things with your staff, your employees, that is not empowerment.
No.
They will not make choices. They will be afraid to make choices. And if your team is afraid to make choices, you are stuck.
Yep. You become the crutch.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're not going to do anything that it's going to cause you to be uneasy with it. And then they become they don't want to take any chances. So I do want to get back to the person doing all their work on the fix and flip because it's a lot cheaper. Those people are not borrowing money from us because we're not lending them money based on what it's going to cost for you to do the work. We're lending it based on what it's going to cost for us to get the work done.
Correct.
Which means we're going to have to hire a GC. So I want to keep that in mind. If you're doing that, then you're typically using your own cash to do this, or maybe you have an investor or a private lender that's contributing. That said, if you're doing all the work yourself and you're utilizing the cost savings in your business model, there's not going to be a bank or a hard money lender that actually does this for a living that is going to lend you money based on that model.
Yeah, and if you are a lender, like a private lender out of your IRA or whatever, and people are coming to you saying, "Yeah, I could do this for $20,000, and it's a new roof, new HVAC, new kitchen, and remodel the bathrooms," you should be saying, "That's great that you can do it for $20,000,
right?
But I can't." And that's a $40,000 rehab or 45 or whatever it ends up being. Like, we're going to have to bake that into it. Just for, and to segue into Scott's question here, what happens if you loan to a fix and flipper and that person passes away? Well, there's a couple things, from our experience, and Bill, you tell me if yours is different than mine. You now are the flipper on that project as the lender. Like you get that now, like because normally in those situations, these fix and flippers aren't a big business. Most of them are not doing 50, 100, 200 flips a year. Most of them are doing between 2 and 10, and they do it on the side. It's their job. They might have a husband or a wife who has a full-time job somewhere else, and they don't want to take over that project. So they're just going to say, I can't do this. It's yours.
And Scott says, would they have insurance? Well, most of them would. And we don't lend to people. We lend to legal entities. And typically they have part of their operating agreement, they have a succession. Now you have a single
member. Yeah.
A single member entity. And if they pass away, then, obviously they're not making payments. We would have to go through the foreclosure process, unfortunately. We can't make them get life insurance. We make them get fire and hazard.
The hazard or builder's risk or whatever insurance that wouldn't cover anything on here because the property is intact. The only thing that would pay out would be a person's life insurance. And like Bill said, we do not make that a requirement of our loans.
But it would be like anything else. If a family member wanted to continue that, then they can finish out the project as long as they're making the payments. If they're not making the payments, then you have to do what you normally do in those situations where you'd have to start the foreclosure process.
And in that scenario, like let's say the family member, the spouse or whomever didn't want to take it back, I would explore a deed in lieu where, if they're the spouse, that's the easiest one. The company, even if it's a sole member entity, it'll revert to the spouse.
Right.
In most states, that's what happens. So they can sign a deed in lieu over to the lender. Before you do that, down date your title and make sure that there aren't any liens or mechanic liens, anything that's clouding title. Because if you take a deed in lieu and you record it, you now own that property. And if there are outstanding liens, you've just inherited those. Those are liens now that you must satisfy.
Right.
So before you do that, down date title.
Now, again, another question from Scott on what advice we would give to a small flipper. Well, one of them is don't get sick or die.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, a good thing to do would not set up a trust, a family trust, and make sure that the assets in that trust go to a beneficiary, and that way you can avoid probate and whatnot with any assets. Because what happens in a trust is a legal entity, and a legal entity never dies, it just changes beneficiaries. So you can have within the trust, if the one beneficiary passes away, um, it will just revert to the other beneficiaries that you would have inside of that trust. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good way to protect the assets for your family. The other thing you need to do if you have a family is make sure that they want these assets. I know so many real estate investors that work their whole life putting these great portfolios together, and none of their kids even want this stuff. They just end up selling it. So make sure that your heirs actually want to be in that business. If they don't, you're gonna end up in some cases with a bunch of siblings that are going to be arguing over, I want this, I want that, I want to sell it, no, I want to get the income. Find out, from your family. You have to have family meetings. Find out what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be in your best interest when you get to a certain age to, think about cashing out.
Yep.
Now, you could do one way to cash out and keep from having to pay, higher capital gains. Now, if you've owned the properties for a while, you have again, I'm not a tax person, so I'm not giving any tax advice. Okay. But you could always sell assets and do it with owner financing. And then the payment streams will then go to your heirs versus, one big lump sum. So those are some things to think about.
Yeah.
My advice is to get an estate attorney and go over your different options with them.
Isn't Mary Hart, isn't she an estate attorney?
Yes. I don't know how much she's practicing on the law side.
Gotcha.
With trusts. I know she also does 1031 exchanges.
Doesn't she have an office in Asheville? Is that right?
She used to.
Oh, she doesn't anymore.
Okay. Kentucky.
That's right. Yeah, she purchased that farm.
She does estate. I'm fairly certain she still does for selected clients estate planning as well. I have a question here from Quentin. What is hard money company? Let me see.
I think it's what if the hard money company owned at the sale of property, the lender on for rehab. I'm not sure I understand the question. Quentin, could you send that to us again? We'll wait on that.
Right. But yeah, there's trusts are a great vehicle. Planning with your family, having family meetings and understanding what your family's goals are is another thing that you should have.
Yep.
I know we talk about this I talk about it all the time, but the Rockefellers, the way they kept their money is by putting together what's called a family office. Mm-hmm. And one interesting thing that they did was they got a life insurance policy on every single child that was born in the family. Because typically what happens is, as the third generation from, let's say you have the first generation makes the wealth, the second generation manages the wealth, the third generation spends all the damn wealth.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. So what a lot of wealthy families have done, and I pick out the Rockefellers because they really kind of started this. They would take out a life insurance policy on every single member of the family that was born at their birth, and the beneficiary would be the family office. So when you did have a case where you had a ne'er do well family member that was just spending all the money, when they did pass away, at least they were contributing new money, right? So even though they were sucking out a lot of the wealth, when they did pass away, they helped reinfuse the wealth. And by the way, with the certain life insurance policies, you can borrow against them. Instead of paying the bank, you're borrowing against those life insurance policies, and you're paying yourself interest. So that's a great way to keep your wealth as well. By the way, Chris Miles, a good friend of ours, teaches folks how to do that, and that's somebody that I highly recommend if you're in that, if you're interested in that. There you go, Money Ripples. Thank you, Scott. Okay, what is owed to the hard money company at the sale of a property they give rehab money for?
Yeah, they gave the rehab money for. So it depends. If you got money, the hard money lender gave you money for the purchase and the rehab, or just the rehab, but your loan amount is what's owed. So if you got 50,000 towards your purchase and 100,000 towards the rehab, 150 is owed, plus any outstanding interest or fees that may apply. If you just got the rehab and you already own the property, and it's $100,000 rehab, you just owe the 100,000 plus whatever interest or fees are outstanding at that time. Is that just rehab? Yeah. So you just pay back the rehab. That's all you pay back. Every lender is a little bit different. Some allow you to accrue the interest and pay it when the property's done. Some require that you pay monthly interest along the way. So if you took $100,000 and you're paying 12% interest and you didn't make any payments through the whole year, you owe $112,000 at the end of it. If you made monthly payments along the way, you just owe the $100,000. And then we have another question from YouMin. Sorry if I butchered that. When an LLC is borrowing money from a hard money lender and the lender asks for a personal guarantee, should the LLC partners should they give personal guarantees? If so, is the personal guarantee equally spread along all, everyone? So you have to look, every state's a little bit different, but like, let's say that, there's 3 partners in an LLC and they all, equally own 33.33%. They all sign personal guarantees. A personal guarantee, depending on what state you are, and you'll have to, talk to an attorney, but depending on what state you are, that personal guarantee is transferable to the wife. So yes, I would say, or to the spouse. So it is transferable.
And typically, if you're, and again, it depends on each state, but usually if you have less than 20% ownership in an LLC, you're not having to do that. It's the other members that have the larger amounts that are signing. Okay.
So she said North Carolina. Well, North Carolina is interesting. I was talking with a customer of ours, and they were getting a loan through a conventional mortgage program, and this is the first that I've seen in North Carolina, but they were just required to sign a personal guarantee, but then they also had to have their spouse consent to the personal guarantee. So that would make me think in North Carolina, it's probably harder to transfer that personal guarantee from one spouse to the other. And that's probably why they made them sign that spousal consent.
Yeah, South Carolina is one of those states too, where if if the husband bought a house and the wife isn't on it, um, she doesn't get it if there was a divorce or a death. You have to include them.
Yeah.
So I forget what they call that, but they don't split the assets just because you're married in the state of South Carolina. Now, Quentin had a follow up. He also said, so you guys make money on the monthly payments. Yes, but that's not all. we, we also make money on the loan fees and the origination fees. Okay. So, and this is one of the things I want people to understand with interest only loans on short term hard money loans. And I'm going to give you a quick example. It is in your best interest to finish the project as quickly as possible. And here's why. Let's say you had a 12% interest rate and it's interest only. That 12% interest rate is annualized. So to come up with the payment, you're taking 12% and you're dividing it by 12 months. So you have 12 monthly payments. If you only make 6 payments and then you pay it off, you've only paid 6% interest.
Annualized. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So lenders have to charge an origination fee in order to. Yes, we make money on the monthly payments, but that's not really where you make your money. You make it on the upfront.
And for full clarity and transparency, we don't make any money on the interest. The investors in our fund make the money on the interest. The only money that we make is off of the origination.
Yeah, and the occasional times when I'm on the corner saying we'll write loans for food.
Yeah. Yeah. But those are great questions. And personal guarantees, to go back to Yu's question, I mean, that's pretty common. I mean, most people will require a personal guarantee, but like Bill said, if you own less than 20%, most lenders aren't worried about getting a personal guarantee from that person. And then, following the spouse, if there's a spousal consent, then yeah, definitely it's going to follow. If there's not a spousal consent, I would, talk with an attorney for that state and get that question clarified.
And the term I was thinking of is community property state. South Carolina is not a community property state. Alabama is not a community property state. North Carolina is. Mm-hmm. I know California is. You could probably Google that fairly easy. Community property states, and that'll tell you if the spouse is going to have that transferred to them. If it's not a community property state, chances are no. Excuse me.
Excuse you, Bill. Yeah.
I forgot to hit mute again.
Well, let's jump over to we've touched on it several times.
Question number 2.
Yeah.
Should everyone have a contingency plan? The short answer is hell yes.
Yeah.
You never need it till you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And in our business, for example, the management company, our origination company, we have life insurance policies that, number one, if I passed away, the life insurance policy pays my wife so she doesn't come in and want to run this business, which she has no idea how to do. Now, don't get me wrong. She's not a dumb individual. It's just, she hasn't been involved in the business. And I don't want, as much as I love Gene, I don't want Gene coming in and saying, all right, we're going to do it this way now. Because Wendy passed away and now I'm the owner or part owner. So we have life insurance policies in places where, they get paid to not be a part of the business. At the same time, the fund also has, as the management company, we have a life insurance policy that if one of us passed away, that the fund has $1 million to pay another fund manager until they can find one that they want to take our place. So yes, you have to have contingencies in place because you never know. You can walk straight out in front of a bus, right?
And it's just good to stress test and run those scenarios. I mean, no one wants to think about the worst case scenarios, but I mean, when you look at legal documents, everything, I mean, they're written for the worst case scenario.
Right.
God forbid that happens, but we have to know and have a plan in case those do happen. So,
right.
It's just part of it. It's part of being a business owner. It's part of, running a business and being responsible for yourself, your family, and other people. So you've got to constantly run that.
I was going to say a great example is our fund documents. If you look at those fund documents, there is contingencies for every scenario. If for whatever reason we had to shut the fund down, there's waterfall situations in place for who gets paid first and how it works down until it's completely liquidated. You have to have all that out in front in case of the worst. Now, as far as contingency plans, and you were talking about stress testing, that's something that you should do in your business all the time.
Yep.
You should look at your numbers, where your revenue sources are coming from, and then say, all right, so what if tomorrow I lose 35 or 40% of my revenue? Can we survive? And if you can't, then you need to do some cost cutting and a combination of cost cutting and putting more money aside, as a hedge to help you overcome that until you can get that business back. The other thing you need to think about too is maybe creating multiple sources of revenue as well. Because, let's face it, things change all the time. And I mean, who knew that COVID was going to happen?
Yep.
There's a lot of businesses out there that were totally affected that only had one way of making money, and a lot of them aren't in business any longer. But if you could easily change to another revenue source, then you were okay. If it's hard for you to turn a big ship around, then not so much, right?
Yeah. Can you bring up that most recent question? So I think I'm understanding this. If the general partner owns less than 10% and the remaining is owned by the limited partner, should the general partner still be giving personal guarantees? That sounds like a syndicated model to me. That's what it sounds like. And I guess it depends on who is putting this together. Is the general partner putting this together, or is it the limited partner who's putting this together? I mean, the person who's putting it together and raising the debt is the person probably who's going to be needing to sign the personal guarantee. If you are in there and you're just kind of a equity investor, then no. I mean, I don't know. I mean, unless you're a very big equity investor, I don't think that you'd want to sign a personal guarantee.
Yeah, I don't know in too many cases where the main financing is requiring the investors to sign personal guarantees. It's typically going to be the general partner, the sponsor, the operator is the one that's signing the personal guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. Looks like Keith is saying some wholesalers ask for up to a $5,000 non-refundable deposit to go into contract. If my ARV differs from what you guys pull, would you still lend on the deal if I bring more money to the table so I wouldn't lose that deposit? In short, yes. I would say, just from my experience, and Bill can chime in on his, I mean, I'm not a fan of putting 5K deposits down. I mean, 500, 1,000, whatever. I mean, because they're a wholesaler. I mean, basically they're just trying to recoup funds because they don't have the ability to close the loans themselves typically. So, they're just trying to lock in some free money. Not always the case, but, experience teaches. So, I would say I don't put $5,000 deposits down. If I don't, non-refundable. No. Would I put a 500 or 1,000? Yeah. I mean, that's the cost of doing business. If I think that there's a profit to be made and I end up being wrong and I lose $500 or $1,000, okay, that's the cost of doing business.
Right.
5,000, that's a little steep.
And what if the appraisal comes back where you have to put down so much money and you have no margin left?
Yeah.
So that's not going to help you. And yes, and by the way, that would be a requirement. If the property comes back at a lower ARV, we're going to require you to bring more money to the table. But you also have to weigh it, whether it's worth making that deal at all.
Yeah. If you have to bring 50 grand down and you stand to make 15,000 at the end of the day, if everything goes right, that's not a deal.
Yeah. Because we all know in real estate, stuff never goes the way it's supposed to.
No, never does.
Now, for the most part, it goes fairly well, but there's always going to be something that comes up that you didn't expect. You don't have a crystal ball. You don't have X-ray vision.
You don't know what's behind the walls. I mean, I was talking with a commercial borrower of ours, and they're talking about a property that they thought was a good buy until they found out that the aluminum wiring in it had to be remediated, which cost $340,000 to remediate all the aluminum wiring. Like that, that can kill a deal.
Yeah. So thanks for saying remediate, making us sound like we're smart. Most people would say remove or replace.
Yeah.
That was the killer of the 1976 or newer mobile homes, or later mobile homes. They put aluminum wiring in them, and they're a fire hazard.
They are a big fire hazard. Yeah. So,
all right. Well, listen, we're going to have to shut this down. We're getting close to the end of the broadcast. Thanks so much. You guys have been great, wonderful questions today. I hope you got a little bit of knowledge thrown at you that would be helpful. Again, our website, we are lenders. Our website is carolinahardmoney.com. If you're a borrower looking to borrow money, we lend in the Southeast for the most part. Click on the Apply Now tab. If you're an investor looking for passive returns, click on the Investor tab. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell, because the bell is on YouTube. Thank you so much, Scott, for
we know that now.
That out. The bell lets you know when our show is getting ready to start.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us for Passive Income Active Wealth, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks.